Welcome back to CodingCat.dev, where we give you cats the freshest dose of dev snacks. Brought to you by Cloudinary, build faster with AI-powered image and video APIs. Need better search? Try Algolia, powering discovery. What up, perfect peeps? Welcome back to CodingCat.dev podcast. Today on the show, I got Brian, also known as bdougie. What's up?
Hey, glad to be back.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. It's been, I think I looked up the correct date. This seems like December of 22 was the last time we had you on, and kind of wanted to get you back on because it's Hacktoberfest and open source is everywhere, and wanted to get an episode out about OpenSauced and kind of your journey around it. So thanks again.
Yeah, sounds good.
So to refresh people's memories a little bit, let me put up our banner. Almost forgot there. So OpenSauced as a project started before Y Combinator and kind of came out of GitHub. Is that?
Yeah. Well, we didn't do Y Combinator.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I gave a bit of a journey in the last time I was here. So like folks do your YouTube searching to hear that story. The journey's like definitely 2 years. We definitely figured out a lot more. But I worked at a company called Netlify, and at Netlify, I built this platform to maintain my own open source projects. My open source contributions. I was more of a contributor than a maintainer. And it's kind of like a CRM for open source. That is like at the point that we talked last time, we had just figured out, okay, how do we get insights and more PR data into one dashboard? And since then, we did go through Techstars shortly after we talked. And then after Techstars, we ended up raising a seed round, scaling up a team a bit. So we're team 8 today, and focus on building successful open source projects. So like that's a blanket statement of what's on the actual website. But the goal really is like we identify like what success in open source looks like. So trying to repeat those through data for projects. And then we have another sort of opportunity for folks to look at your own personal profile, your personal contributions. But the real focus is how can we make more projects successful.
So the challenging part for me is like open source, even large projects, they're often backed by a big company. So can you talk just a minute about like that seed round and like what that kind of took to say like, hey, even open source is hard. Now we're going to make this open source thing about open source. And like, what was that like going through that?
Yeah, I mean, so like, I think we originally started this off as like, can we make people successful in open source? And that was like immediately like when I was still at GitHub, that was my goal. I was doing developer relations, getting people to use GitHub better, find out how to like do some like secret tips and tricks of the platform. So at that point we had like a community around, but like to go take funding, we had to figure out like what the business was. So speaking of Hacktoberfest, like one of the first paid opportunities was us providing data for all of Hacktoberfest in October. And that was like the thing that sort of convinced me to leave GitHub and work on this full time, is that there was a signal that people wanted to see that enough data in one place at the same time across organizations and repos and profiles. But the business side was really, there are companies that are participant in open source. So like you've got like Vercel and Next.js. Like we were just talking about, Sanity has like an open source like CMS. And a bunch of other plugins and a community around that. There are folks who are really good at this. Like they just get it. They get the ethos of open source. And there are folks who are still up and coming and kind of haven't figured it out or want to get started. So what we figured out is there are specific metrics and stats that you can look at every single repo and get a good idea of like, okay, are you doing a good job or a bad job? And one of the metrics that we have in like a repository page is, I don't know if we want to jump in the demo, but I could like show this stuff but I could also hypothetically talk about it as well.
Let's do that. I'll take a quick break here earlier than we normally do, but I think it's perfect timing. So let me take a quick break, pay the bills, and then we'll come back and we'll dive directly into OpenSauced.
Sounds good.
Cloudinary allows you to remove any unwanted backgrounds, so you can reuse assets efficiently. You can also erase objects and people from images for placement in new experiences. For more engaging content, easily turn static images into dynamic animations and rely on smart cropping to always deliver assets with a focus on the most relevant objects to your brand. Cloudinary Programmable Media. Build faster with AI-powered image and video APIs.
Algolia helps you create a search and discovery engine in 3 steps. Step 1, import your data. Import the API client, initialize the client and index, load the local JSON file, and then push to Algolia. Step 2, configure relevance. Define searchable attributes, add business metric, specify facets and filtering. And step 3, build your search UI, import widgets from the library, add instant search component, add search input, refine by attribute, display results, add pagination. And just like that, you're done. Build search effortlessly with Algolia.
Huge thanks once again to Algolia and Cloudinary for both hosting our images and allowing us to search all across CodingCat. So thanks so much. So we talked briefly about kind of why the why behind getting started with OpenSauced. So now we're going to dive into OpenSauced altogether, and Brandon's going to talk more about like what functionality and things there are. If I can find the right button, here we go.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. I'm like, we're just jumping right into the demo. You asked the right question, so here we are.
Coming in hot.
Yeah, but you asked like the business side of this and like us getting the seed round, why this makes sense.
Yeah.
And so Superbase at the time of this recording announced their Series C fundraising, which is like very coincidental. We're Superbase users, and this is like the data of all Superbase for the last 6 months. And this is what we've been working on. Is like, how can we tell a story for success at open source? So the thing I was sort of alluding to is this thing called confidence. And confidence is the ability for somebody to make a contribution to this project. And the way we've been marking this is like folks who star and fork. Like if you look at Superbase, I think is like 70,000 stars. We don't show totals here.
Cool.
So I think that's not looking at the top, like anything over 15,000 stars is like top 1% of all GitHub.
Oh.
So at that point, like once you're in the top 1%, stars don't matter. But if you do star, you fork, you participate in open source, 40% of the folks who engage with Superbase make contributions.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting because one, that's a metric that cool. I can see there's a bunch of stars, but like I can also see there's not a lot of engagement. So like if I take a peek at TypeScript, TypeScript's obviously sponsored by a bigger company, which is Microsoft. And for being fair, let's just go back to the 6 months because we looked at Superbase is 6 months. And a lot of data is going to crunch it, but it's going to be around like 10. Oh, actually, surprise, 16%. I looked at this last year, towards the end of last quarter, and the number is way lower. So it looks like they're doing a great job of this. Really, I guess folks who are available to make contributions.
This doesn't like surprise me at all because like I feel like we all use TypeScript, or many of us use it, but like to contribute back, it's pretty complex, like under the hood.
Yeah, but the one thing I'd probably look at is like, okay, look at outside contribution.
Oh.
So the majority of the contributions are coming from folks who work at Microsoft. And the way that I'm looking at that is like I can go to contributors. Here, you mentioned Cloudinary as a sponsor, so shout out to them. All of our image, I wrote a blog post on how we did this, but all these images are cached using Cloudinary as well. We try to do a lot of really elegant things around the GitHub API. And one thing we don't want to do is constantly fetch images from GitHub. So Cloudinary actually solved that for us pretty early. But I actually stand corrected because the majority of these folks who've contributed recently they're actually not maintainers of TypeScript. So maybe some former guests that you see on this list.
I'm kind of curious if they were like former Microsoft employees that have like they're still passionate about it but have moved on to, I don't know.
Yeah, so Andaris is. I do know Andaris, and he might be working at Replay right now. But he used to work at Microsoft and specifically on TypeScript, and so he still makes tons of contributions.
It's hard to get away from that stuff. Like when open source is in your blood, you just want to keep kind of pounding away at the project you're so passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. And like this is like to go back. So confidence is one thing. The other thing that we started, so we'll pick up Andaris again. The thing we actually just shipped recently is this thing called, so we have these dev cards, but we have this
love that
Oscar score, so open source contributor rating.
So
the idea,
this is funny. Like I thought I was like doing great, and I looked, and then I opened. I have another account for all my work stuff, and I opened that one. I'm like, oh wait, that one's doing even better. And then I realized it's the higher the number, the better you're doing, not the lower the number. I was like, oh no. Yeah. For folks who are in the top 2%, top 1%. We do have a little badge here.
but consistently Andaris will be within the top 1, 2, 3%. And he's this, I know him because I use his data for examples all the time, because he just shows up in a lot of different front end projects. But so the Oscar is like a metric based on not only confidence, but also quality, and then sway. And actually, I think we're actually going to be updating our docs to include all this context. We just wanted to be able to test this for a couple months before we actually divulge how this works. Sway is the ability of generating conversation within contributions, like issues, peer reviews. And we have a fourth pillar we actually haven't shipped yet. But the idea is like, you can't game the number. You just participate and you'll have a number.
Sure. Is that like, that includes, I guess, a lot of times like people that open issues versus close issues, there's two different kind of aspects to that. So is that score leaning more towards the people that are kind of doing the harder part, which is usually the solutioning and like that side of it, or is it just in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think your example is subjective, because like, is it harder to close issues or is it easier to open issues?
Yeah.
Very subjective, and it's very different for every project. And I think the challenge that we've had is trying to figure out what success looks like across projects, because like TypeScript might get a lot of energy and a lot of PRs, but like any sort of machine learning project, they don't get a lot of PRs.
Yeah.
Any foundational model like Mixtral, they don't get a lot of PRs. What they get is a lot of issues. And the way they work and like decide and like do advancement of like, well, whether things are working and feedback and metrics is through issues. So the ability to generate conversation through an issue. So like if you initiate the issue and you have conversation generated based on the issue, like you have a higher score. If you participate and get reactions, so like you respond and you get a bunch of hearts and stars and favorites on your comment, that boosts your score.
Nice.
But like you can gamify that stuff, but what we're trying to do is like, how do we build a score that's actually not gamifiable? So like you can do one thing really well, but you kind of have to show up in multiple different areas. And I think the best example is like on GitHub profiles, you've got like the T graph and that blob that shows like how many commits, how many issues you do, how many PR reviews. And a lot of folks are kind of really leaning towards the right or the top. But what we're really just trying to show is like, there is a story to be told. And we don't want to hyper focus on like the actual number itself, but eventually we get to the point where we can actually talk through where that number came from, which is like this representation. Like very few people have multiple projects that they're consistently contributing to, like an Andaris. But in addition, you can see like their comments as well, like start clicking in through and like trying to see what conversations are active and participating in. And yeah, that's the hope is that we can show this story for open source. And then what we've been really focused on is how do we tell the story for enterprises.
Have you seen anyone with a 300?
I think 293 was the highest I've seen. That was a GitHub employee who maintains a lot of SDKs.
I think in the write-up, Luca had like 297 or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Actually, Becca did do a blog post specifically. So at one point, and what we're doing is looking back 90 days. So my inspiration for the Oscar was like FICO. So like in the US, you've got a FICO score. And as long as you're participating in credit and debt, your FICO stays up higher. But if you don't participate, you could be a 0. And like 0 is not bad. 0 is like not enough information. And what we'd like to do is eventually, like, if you look at me, because I've been pretty heads down in a lot of more sales conversations as of recent. So shout out, I'm a 69. But I've got one PR in the last 16 days. I got a ton of comments because that's what I do. Yep. All I do is comment on stuff and review PRs. But that's basically where we are today. Like, to answer your original question with like, this is the thing that we've been talking to companies about and really establishing that we can identify tastemakers. And the thing that you had alluded to the blog, but the thing that we've been really focused on is how do you identify culture within code bases? And that's the thing that we sort of stumbled upon and figured out, that if you can identify, okay, these are I call them tastemakers, but these are the folks who can make decisions, can review code, can help advance the roadmap. And then these are the mentors, and these are the folks who can help leverage to upskill yourself within this organization. So I won't read this blog post for everyone, but we have like a number of blog posts around this idea in the last month that I think the majority of them, Becca and John have been writing in the last basically month, 2 months.
Yeah. I love the content that's coming out. I usually catch a lot of it on Dev too, but this is good to go directly to as well. That's pretty cool. I am curious, like I keep bringing it up because it's happening soon and I'm stressed about it. Not stressed, but like concerned about it. Is there an easy way for you to like track back to like tags and stuff or labels and stuff like that? So if I want to look up Hacktoberfest and like who's doing all across, all of those labels, is there a possibility of getting that info?
Yeah, so up until last week, yes. And I say that because our Explore page in particular was based on labels, and we had some popular labels like TypeScript, JavaScript, Hacktoberfest. Yep. And that's how we started this entire project, was based on labels on repos. So labels on issues and PRs, we don't quite, we actually capture that data, we don't expose it in the platform. Okay. And it's just one of those situations where like there's a lot of data we get from GitHub, but we need to take that back a bit to not over index on providing something anybody can use all the time, every time. Eventually you got to use GitHub for that type of stuff.
Sure. Makes sense. That's cool. And then can we dive into kind of workspaces a little bit more? Because I think that's a newish feature and I think there's a lot of power around it.
Yeah. So the blog post that we have about like GitHub repos being a data set. And like what we're seeing right now is like we have specifically like GitHub Copilot. So Copilot is like code completion. You can now chat with it. You can now generate your tests and generate code with it. Like that's a really good, like I think that's when it comes to generative AI, like very clear space, like outside of like generating images on Midjourney. But there's like a new phase that I think we're sort of now looking into, is where we now have this, like, in addition to Copilot, now we have this knowledge companion. I would like to know what's happening within my repository, my organization, within open source projects the last 90 days. Like, let me know, like, who are the folks I should be reaching out to for reviewing this part of the code base.
Yeah.
Cool. So workspaces we shipped in March of this year. And it was really our first step into how do you get like repository agnostic within the data that you're trying to source and get answers and questions around. So we need to build like a team product, and this is our first couple passes into that space. And the idea is you could add repos to a workspace and then get questions around that. So we have this other thing called Star Search, and this kind of sort of is a glue around like why you would even throw data into a workspace. So if I want to find like the maintainers of all the projects that I have here on the left, it's going to do a little quick vector search that we're already indexing using like Mitchell summaries and OpenAI embedding. So we have another blog post on like how we did this as well. It's funny there's no maintainers found on these projects, but it probably should have found somebody. But at least we know these are the folks that are doing all the maintenance on the app itself. So we'll need to see kick the virtual box and see if there's something going on there. But the idea that we had was actually had a conversation with these folks, Prisma.
Oh yeah.
And they came to us with like a sort of exploration. The exploration was like, hey, Prisma has tons of users worldwide, open source. We'd love to find like who are the power users of Prisma. So we ended up just doing a bit of searching, like data collection. We haven't shipped this feature publicly yet, but like if you want to find some heavy hitters using a certain tool, like that would be a thing that maybe we do in the future. We haven't quite validated the entire process, but we can generate a list from that sort of hidden feature, which is all the biggest users of Prisma. And I think I picked 97 repos, folks who are just heavily using this product. So now the idea is that I could see in comparison, and these are all not the same organization on GitHub. These are across organizations.
Like what was the methodology, or like how did you find those repos to actually go after?
We asked them what is high usage for Prisma? Like what are the signals we look at? So they have a config file. So we already can find like through GitHub search. And like we do use GitHub search. We actually use SourceGraph for this. SourceGraph has a pretty powerful open source search tool. And then we sort of validated, okay, these are folks that are using Prisma. Now, who are the folks that are using these features? And then you can kind of look through like issues and PRs and then different file types based on what they provided us. So again, like this worked for Prisma today. It could work for another project in the future, but we quite haven't productized this yet. But it was basically just asked them like, how would you do this manually, and how can we automate that part? So we automated that part, and that's what the list that we're looking at here.
Yeah, and this kind of reminds me, maybe not this piece, but like it brings me back to like Orbit when it was still a thing.
Yeah.
You could find like who's close to you, who's actually interacting with you within your orbits, and like you could find everyone and like reach out to them and give them swag and like all that DevRel stuff that I love to do. It was right there at my fingertips, and I've kind of lost that since that's gone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I'll be remiss to not say like folks have reached out to us to like build Orbit features, and I think there are tools out there that you could build yourself. And I think what we discovered, and I already had the confidence that like folks are already building OpenSauced internally. Folks have already built Orbit internally as well. So like that was also the uphill battle for Orbit, is like, do I really need this, or can I just like know how to use GitHub and get the answers I need to know? So like that's the conversation with Prisma, is like they know how to get this stuff manually. How do we make this easier for them? And I think with Orbit as well as like you get a high impact person within your Orbit. You get a signal to basically say, hey, thanks so much for checking us out. Like, would you like to jump on a call? Whatever the sort of engagement piece would be. So yeah, and like there's a lot to kind of pull back the onion on that too as well, because like there's like Orbit, CrowdDev, both in the same month took a step back, and like through acquisitions no longer like a platform.
Yep.
The caveat of the CrowdDev is actually open source, so
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so their product has been open source the entire time. A bit of like a hurdle to use it, and like self-hosted. But there is now I was just looking at a tweet. Guy used it at GitLab, and I'm gonna mess up his name because he's gonna hate me for this, but I want to say Brandon, but I could be Brendan. But I know
maybe he's Brandon, Brian.
Yeah. But there's a team working on self-hosting CrowdDev and making that a product. So like that's a thing. There's obviously Common Room, which I think leans into DevRel type stuff. So which again, there's like enough solutions for folks that we just didn't feel like we needed to be another solution to replace Orbit. We feel like their folks will figure that out, or there'll be another tool that comes up. But yeah, we've been very clear that we don't want to like include Twitter data, include LinkedIn data, and expand the sort of resources that we're sort of pulling in, because I think our focus really should be like, how can we make engineers successful in engineering, whether that's open source or closed source behind the firewall.
Sure. So I guess to ask it in a direct way, OpenSauced 2 years, 3 years from now, what does that look like? Are you just kind of finding features, finding what works? Are you acquired by someone and they tell you what to do? What's going on with OpenSauced in that version?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, I get this all the time too as well. Like we took funding from Bold Start Ventures and GitHub, so like there's opportunity for like venture scaling. There's opportunity for us to embed our products somewhere else. So like in 2 to 3 years, what we have right now is like we have the makings of what success looks like in open source. The thing that we're actually leaning to, we haven't changed their website on, is like orchestrating developer culture. Okay. So if the culture of developers is 2 PRs merge, or if the culture of developers, we use issues to communicate feature development and roadmap, like the part that we're actually working on actively is like, how do you automate that part? So what we've done recently is generating a code owners file. So code owners file is a feature that GitHub has built, but also if you go to like Kubernetes, the owners file is very similar. And within a folder structure, you then can find out, okay, Alex is the expert on the CMS and bdougie is the expert on testing. And the way you could do that is like, you could literally just assign Alex in the code owners file. It would be like, Alex is now the expert in this folder. I'm the expert in the test folder. Or what we've built is you can automate that by just saying, now, we didn't get to the repo page, but like we built this thing called Lottery Factor. And Lottery Factor is like the ability to see if more than two people would do more than 50% of all the work.
I'd love to see it. You want to show it off?
Yeah. You can go back to sharing the screen. So, so there's like a story here, like PGVector. If no one knows PGVector, PGVector is it's a tool to like basically take Postgres and make it AI ready by like vectorizing your summaries within the tables. You can add those to your embeddings, but look it up. I don't have time to sell you on PGVector, but it exists.
It works. Just trust it.
Yeah.
Use it.
Yeah, and we use PGVector internally as well.
Nice.
So like this is a project But what we found in the last 6 months, like this is the numbers of like 4 contributors are doing 47% of all the PRs. So like my question was, PGVector is not a company. It's open source Postgres extension. Who's this person? So real quickly, I was able to figure out that this person is actually CTO of Neon Database. You can see the Neon contributions. And eventually what I got into is like, I'm connected to Neon. So like they did a bunch of performance updates, pretty cool. But what was interesting is like, there's another person who created PGVector and like, they didn't show up in this list. And the reason for that is like, we built this new feature. So if you click that too quick called YOLO coding. And because of trunk-based development and a couple other reasons, Andrew Kane specifically looks like a YOLO coder, but like this is like the decision make on how he maintains his project. But we're able to see that list here. So based on knowledge, if I was like, hey, I want to find out who the experts are or who the people in performance or who could I reach out to talk about making a contribution here, like Andrew's going to show up like through and through. But I could also now have more context in like what these folks have done as well within this project. So the idea is like, I'm coming in cold into the PGVector. Like, how do I know who to talk to, who to engage with, and then take that same experience. And this is what our focus now has been. Take this experience we have today and then ship that to the enterprise. So I go to Microsoft and I'm like, I've been tasked to do something within this repository because they're all GitHub internally at Microsoft. Where do I get started? Who do I talk to? Or like get blame, but better is like the sort of phrase I was using earlier this summer. We didn't go to market with that one, but the idea is like, how can we now tell better stories and understand like who are the knowledge bearers of this code base?
I think that's really huge, even for someone like trying to be a first-time contributor into a project too. Like now you at least have some sort of connection you can get back to and say like in an issue or something like that, or like go out to X and like actually tweet right at them or like something to kind of feel more comfortable, or like find that Discord server you didn't know existed because that's where they do their chats out there on Neon or whatever. So that's pretty cool. I love that.
Yeah.
So did we actually get to my question of where is bdougie and OpenSauced in the 3 years? Maybe we did. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what we're currently actively working on, and I'm happy to talk to anybody who's listening, like we're trying to have stronger partnerships with the folks I mentioned. So like with GitHub and folks who see the value in having better dev stats insights, having vectorized search across code bases based on issues, discussions, and code, because I think everyone's hyper focused on the code side. But like, if I see somebody's like, I'm asking why this feature existed, how do we get to like this thing getting shipped and it being a dud? Like, let's go back in the storytelling. And the one thing I did at GitHub, so like at GitHub, I was led developer advocacy. I got to like see GitHub Action ship, Copilot, code spaces, like GitHub projects all get shipped while I was there. And always doing storytelling. And one of the stories that I saw that it basically was shared after I left, but they had this cool thing in the engineering team. And there's an article on this, which is Yesterday in Engineering, where they would use GitHub Actions to automate all issues and PRs opened and summarize what happened in engineering yesterday. And then they have last week in engineering, and they would summarize what happened in engineering last week. So think about your organization or your repo. Like I'm out for 2 weeks. I come back and I'm like, oh man, how do I catch up? Well, I guess I'm just gonna like scroll back through Slack and scroll back through like all this other stuff. But like the world that we're moving into pretty quickly, like whether folks are all in our AI or skeptical at this point, like neither here or there. Like I think AI is going to be here. Like,
oh yeah,
don't come at me. But I think even more than Web3, I think AI has some clear use cases. But when you have a use case of like summarize my work or summarize what happened while I was out, like that's a killer feature right there. And what we'd love to be partnering with is like, hey, we can structurize our RAG data. So their retrieval, access, whatever, augmented generation. That's like what everyone's doing right now when it comes to LLMs and large language models. So everyone, like the hardest thing about AI is data. Like I think Hugging Face, the CEOs actually went on a tour trying to hire people out in San Francisco doing local meetups. And that was a quote that sort of stuck in my head, which is like, they need more data sets. They need more people to share data so that we can train more foundational models. And we're all sitting on a big footprint of data. In like 10 years plus, well, GitHub's now what, 14, 15 years
Yeah.
at this point. Math is going to be hard on the fly, but yeah, I think roughly around 15 years. And sorry, I'm correcting myself. It's more than 15 years, but basically, sorry, I'm going to do the math, which is 2025 will be 15 years. Yeah. 2008 to 2025.
Close enough.
Roughly. Sorry. It'd be 14 years, 15 years next year. Yeah.
It's all good.
Anyway, someone correct me in the show notes. Comment below. That's one way to get engagement.
That's right.
But anyway, what I'm getting at is like, where we see ourselves is like we have a footprint on how folks are transferring knowledge and orchestrating their culture. Now, whether that's us becoming like a growth stage VC backed company, or whether that's us like saying, hey, we've got this cool open source project, or we're doing this somewhere else, I don't know. But I think if you're an investor, like we're in an IPO in the next like 10 years, so like let's take the next check, and like we're gonna scale up the team and ship our AI features. But if you're just an open source maintainer, or you're an engineer in a team and you want to hang out with us and like answer some of these questions, like hit me up. And I'd love to like ride along shotgun with like how you do your job and see if we can help augment that.
Yeah. And like, this is also open source too. So like, feel free to put your issue, put your PR in against the issue and like fix stuff out in open source. And maybe you could add some amazing feature that takes off too. And then Brian will probably hire you the next day after that to maintain it, right?
Yeah, no promise on the hiring, but yeah, definitely show up. But I mean, everything that I'm showing you here is open sourced. Our database is not open source, but we do have an API. So API to OpenSauced.pizza. And then some of the AI stuff we're doing is actually not open source because we didn't know what, in the world of AI, we just didn't know how much stuff they're out there.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, it was open source when we first started this process early this year. And it was hard to like have contributors keep up with what we were doing as we were trying to move fast. So our API is closed sourced, but the API itself you could hit directly, API to OpenSauced.pizza.
Nice. That's cool. Build stuff off it. Perfect. I'm out of questions. Do you have anything else you want to
add? No, honestly, we're at the point where like we just would love to have feedback. Well, we figured out like it's like this thing. We figured out distribution through like large companies and like getting more engineers leveraging open source internally. So if anybody's like interested in having that conversation, we have a few folks, like quite a few maintainers and other folks in our Slack that we've been engaged with on a regular basis. But at this point, like I had to shout out to people like use the thing, give me feedback, open up an issue. We've got also a way to do discussions as like community support. So yeah, hit us up.
Love it. Go check out OpenSauced. App.OpenSauced.pizza will get you there. I think you can get to it from the main page too.
Yeah.
We're gonna do that fun part of our pod where we call it perfect picks. And so I'll let you do yours because this has totally been intriguing me as it's been sitting here.
Yeah. So I've been listening to so I had an issue where my podcast app like crashed. I think it's like one of the new beta features, like it won't open. So I started listening to Apple Music and I was like, I'm in the gym or I go for a run. I want to start listening to like stuff. And like, this is a person I've known for years, like MF Doom. He's a hip hop artist. He actually unfortunately passed away in 2020 through complications. It's in his Wikipedia. But I love the journey and the story of this rapper. And so MF Doom, he's like essentially a comic book character. As a rapper. So like there's a lot of folks like if you listen to sort of hardcore music or if like I think like if you ever watched Beavis and Butthead back in the day, Gwar was like personification of artists. Like they have a story, but they have like a actual real identity, but they project the story. Like I actually personally think hip hop and rap is basically like professional wrestling, where you have like these egos that you build. Like now it's coming out that folks like Tupac, who was like an arts kid, like he was like putting on a show for like who he actually was. Like
I think I was just listening to like Childish Gambino is kind of giving up that name now too.
Yeah, and he's another arts kid too as well. Yeah. Like totally what we call blurds, black nerds. So MF Doom, MF Doom's like one of the original black nerds. So like back in the 80s, 90s, he had a group that normal hip hop, like the conscious hip hop, like that's what they called it back in the day, but then it turned into like gangster rap and a bunch of other stuff. But they were kind of like similar to De La Soul, and they got like on the label, and they didn't quite get to the place they wanted to be. So he actually took a break from doing hip hop. So he came back like late 20s, overweight, like this like dad bod, everything. But he came back and did a show in New York, but he wore a stocking over his face and he rapped as if he was a comic book character. And it became a thing. Like it took off so much that he started wearing a mask, this like silver mask that he just got from the Gladiator movie. Towards the end, he puts on this like weird looking mask. So anyway, like every song is like the personification of a comic book villain, but a villain that's got a troubled past, kind of like a Doctor Doom. So like MF Doom, Doctor Doom kind of have overlap. So if anybody likes comic books, likes hip hop, wants to like listen to an entire story as an album, that's what I've been doing. Highly recommend check out MF Doom. He's collaborated with a ton of artists. He's overlapped with a bunch of people, but he's actually purposely always been like underground, to the point where like folks asked him why he never takes the mask off. And it's because I have a normal, like his answer is because he has a normal life. Like he's got a wife and kids. Like he wants to be able to go to the store without people like finding out who he is. And for the longest time up until like only recently, like people never saw him without the mask. And I just think it's a really amazing story. Great music. Folks, check it out.
Wow. Good story. I love that one. Has quite a few albums too. What, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9-ish albums, something like that.
Yeah, he went pretty. I think even one came out like even recently, or just like right after he passed away. So yeah, he put a lot of work in, and yeah, great storyteller.
Nice. Okay, my pick. I don't have a great backstory, but all I can give you guys is the fact that I guess a white nerd is just a nerd. I don't know. I guess that's what I was growing up. So like Saturday morning, this was me. Like X-Men was on. This is all I did. I sat there with my little like bowl of cereal and just loved this stuff. And we just got Disney Plus again, which this is super annoying that's up there, but whatever. So I was able to watch, they released a whole new X-Men 97 as new episodes that came out. So it's got me like rehooked all over again, kind of going down this side of things. And I'm not as crazy as my son, who's like full on anime, Jujutsu Kaisen, like everything, if anyone knows that side, but like this old school stuff and this style, I just totally dig it. And like, it's kind of fun to even see like all the movies and everything that's come out around these characters, and going back to this old kind of version of them has just brought me so much nostalgia. It's fantastic. So definitely check it out if you're into X-Men for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I also watched the X-Men series as a kid, like every Saturday, and also watched 97 and absolutely loved it.
I haven't finished it yet, but so far I'm super stoked. I thought like, it's been so many years and like graphics have come so much further, and I still was like, no, it's fine. It's great. It's all I need.
Yeah, they did a great job.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for updating me on OpenSauced. I can't wait to see like where you take it next. Super stoked.
Same.
All right, man. Catch you later.
See ya.